All right, and we're live.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Relational podcast, where we dig deep and reach high. And it's always progress through action. I am your co-host, Payron Baxter,
And I am your co-host, Ram Sandoval. All right, and we're live.
and again, we are the Relational podcast. What's up, Rom is wearing
everybody?
the
Welcome to the hold on.
double V.
podcast,
Where we dig deep and reach what's going high. On? It's always
I got
progress through
echo
action.
somewhere here.
I am your co-host, Echo somewhere here,
Oh, should I
folks.
turn? Let me mute.
There's a ghost in the room too. But Rom's wearing the double V shirt, which is for democracy. Those were the folks that fought in World War One. They fought fascism abroad to come back here and fight fascism at home. The reason I know that because I have that same shirt and I haven't worn it yet. And Rom is making it look so good. But I'm so glad to see you, brother. I just want to at least shout out your shirt before I shout you out because the history is deep and it's Black History Month. We got to educate folks. What's up, man? How was your Valentine's Day?
My Valentine's Day, well, I was sick. So Thursday when we
okay.
went on, it was I was starting to feel something. And by Friday, it was a wrap. And we didn't have a babysitter, so got flowers. We ordered in, so we did what we could, but it was pretty uneventful this year.
Hey, it's okay. Hey, as long as you got the flowers, you got the chocolates, you got the food, whatever the case may be. I'm sure she was happy. I'm sure she was there because Black love is 365, not just on one day. But yeah, man, we have an amazing guest, and I'm gonna bring her on. Before we do, I want to remind folks we have 625 days until midterms. I know we're not even a month into this second Trump regime. I had somebody tell me a couple of days ago, they said, I don't know what's going to happen in 4 years. I said, I don't know what's going to happen in 4 weeks. So just holding on to those numbers, keeping our eye on the prize, and having the hard conversations to move us forward is the only way. Make sure folks are comfortable being uncomfortable is what is the only ingredient in this recipe that will get us to the next stage because a lot of folks don't know. And I think our guest today, we're going to have a real conversation about that, and I think we'll be able to move some rocks to be able to move the mountain. I'm gonna bring her in.
Yeah, let's do it.
All right. Now again, I'm not the IT guy, folks, so I'm gonna let Rom do this. Oh, there she is. There we go.
Yeah,
we have
welcome.
Dr. Kimberly Hardy, who is the second vice chair of the North Carolina Democratic Party, an amazing person that I love, and I couldn't wait to have on the show. How you doing, Doc?
I'm good. Thanks y'all so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
Well, awesome. Yes. Well, as we get into it, if you just want to give folks just kind of a 1,000-foot view of kind of who you are, why you are, what you are, and we'll just start from there.
Okay, so like you said, I'm second vice chair for the state Democratic Party, which technically makes me the highest ranking Black woman in North Carolina politics right now on either side of the aisle. And I say that not to be self-aggrandizing, but to say like I'm just a regular person, but I'm also out here representing regular people. And it matters that we are in these spaces and that our voices in these spaces, and I carry those voices with me. The concerns of like my fellow single moms, the concerns of just regular people every day. So I get this lofty position through election, hoping to be reelected next weekend.
That's right.
But at the end of the day, it's I'm doing it because it's a calling. And so I'm actually a social work professor at Fayetteville State University. Been a social work professor for many years. I still identify as a social worker. Everything I do is informed by my foundation in that work. I'm a freedom fighter. I'm fighting for justice. This is what this is for. So my classroom is a lab. My classroom is the community, and so I take this with me everywhere I go, encouraging my students who will be the next generation of rabble rousers if I do my job right. So this is something I've been invested in a long time. So the passion didn't come with the position. The passion is why I sought the position, and it's the thing that keeps me going in this work every single day.
And your first forte into this wasn't just second vice chair, right? You had moved
No,
up the ranks. Okay, so
I
tell us a
did.
little
I
about
did.
that.
I actually ran for the state legislature. I was recruited to run in 2018, but wasn't able to do it then because of just rules with the UNC system that we just weren't aware of. But I ran in the 2020 election for House District 43. They took this very teeny tiny district and blew it up to include areas like where I live now, which is in Linden, which is like 5 minutes north of the Fayetteville line, and an area that we call east of the river, so east of the Cape Fear River. And it's very largely rural, very largely red. And so they blew that up with the gerrymander, as they do,
Yes, they
and
do.
made it a seat that was winnable, but would require some folks to abandon some beliefs they have about who should be representing them. And so some of those folks couldn't get past that. And so they wound up, I made it through the primary, but I lost in the general. In the primary, I unseated the only Democrat in the in the state house that was facing a primary challenger. He got sent home, and he was what we like to call a dino, or a
Oh yeah.
Democrat in name only. And so I did a service there, right? But then came up just short in the 2020 general election. But from there was unanimously voted in, nominated and voted in as president of the Democratic Women of Cumberland County in December, and in January of the following year was second vice president of Democratic Women for the statewide, which is, for anyone who is not aware, it's one of the affiliated organizations or auxiliary organizations of the North Carolina Democratic Party. And so I was still sort of engaged in party work, but through this other vehicle. And then in February of 2023, the members of the State Executive Committee, which is literally more people than it takes to win DNC chair, by
It's
several hundred,
wild. It's wild.
in as second vice. And so now I'm running for re-election to that position. Like I said, election day is the 22nd of the month. So
All right.
yes,
So
this is
I mean,
not my first rodeo in politics here.
no, not the first rodeo, not the first horse or the first rope. We were both, going through. You're running for re-election. I will not be running for re-election. I've given my experience a few times on this show, but what was your experience like? Because this was your first experience as second vice chair
Correct.
for the state. So, like, what was your experience like? How was your first forte into the big game, if you will?
Right, the 60,000 foot view, right? Like the 100,000 foot view is in DC, but
Right.
from the
We're
60,000 foot
gonna keep
view,
we're gonna keep
yeah, we're
moving
gonna
up.
keep it down here. It was really eye-opening in a lot of ways. And some of those ways weren't great. If we're being 100% honest, some of those things that I learned in this position were not great. I learned that there is a lot. First of all, it's 24/7. We never
Yep.
stop. We're never not on. And you know that as a county chair.
Let me pause
Imagine.
you there, Doc. If you guys don't know, Dr. Hardy would be in multiple counties and multiple cities across the state in one day. Okay, this was like the Energizer Bunny of chairs. I mean, it was shocked me. I'm like, I'm calling. Hey, I'm on the road driving from this county. I'm like, well, what time? It's 3 in the morning. And I mean, I wasn't calling Dr. Hardy 3 in the morning. I'm just saying it would be constantly. That's a whole different conversation. If you were, that's not happening. But still, my point is, she was always moving and shaking. And folks, this was a
And
county chair that was working for you. Sorry.
we'll be doing it again because county party conventions are coming up. And so on the 26th, I'll start it in Warren County, addressing the Dems there in the morning, and then coming back to my home county of Cumberland, and then going down to Bladen County for their convention. And that's just the ones I know of right now.
Goodness gracious.
But wherever they call, we try to make sure that we're there. I'll be at the Wainwright dinner in a couple of weeks. Like, there's wherever they call, that we show up. And one of the things that was eye-opening was that wasn't historically the case, especially down east. Down east has felt very abandoned.
Yes.
When I did for I know, but for your viewers, a 30 county tour of Eastern North Carolina. It was a listening tour specifically focused on the decreasing numbers of African American Democrats coming out to vote. I wanted to know why. And so, as I say all the time, every good social worker starts with an assessment. And so I needed to go out and find out. And I would spend the whole day in the county and end with the meeting with the county leadership in the evening. Usually there was no structure. I went to the mall, I went to the local restaurant. If somebody said you should go to that barbershop, I went to that barbershop. And what I heard from folks over and over again was very succinctly summed up from the mayor pro tem of Burgaw in Pender County, Reverend James Malloy. He said, "We don't vote because we feel disrespected, because no one ever feels like they have to come out here to earn our votes."
Mm.
And that was huge. When I was in Pasquotank County, it originally was just me. I was just the one going. When I was in Pasquotank, they said, they were so excited because that was another thing I learned, that because we did, if some folks don't show up for them from the state party, even if the second vice chair shows up, they are really excited and they feel
Right.
seen and they feel valued. And I was glad that I could bring them that. But they said, you know what? Statewide candidates never come out here. And so I
Mm.
started bringing statewide candidates out with me everywhere I went. And so, those that could make it, and there were a lot of them, would show up, trip after trip. They would be there in the evening after a long day of work for some of them, campaigning for others, and they would sit and listen to what these people had to say, because they would listen to the debrief from the meeting before I'd let them give their stump speech, because I didn't want them to stump and go. I wanted
Right.
them to hear from these
Mm-hmm.
folks. And so, but what I learned was like, that is just so missing and so necessary, because when you show up 2 weeks before the election, which everybody talks about,
Mm-hmm.
there's no relationship there. And at its core, this is about relationship building. Relational organizing is what I teach every day at FSU, that you have to show up and be present for these folks and help them meet the needs that they've identified. And you have to do it without a transactional expectation. Like, okay, I voted for you, or I supported your community thing. I need you to vote for me now. Show up between the election cycles. And every one of these communities has elected officials, Democrat or Republican.
Mm-hmm.
They need to be at the things that are happening in their community to the extent that they can get there. You're not always in DC. You're not
Right.
always in Raleigh. And so you need
Mm-hmm.
to show up for these folks, because they take note when you are not there. And so, so I learned that, that they feel like they're disconnected on an island unto themselves in these counties. I also learned that the counties don't seem to work together very well. People are kind of piecing it together on their own. And I said to a lot of county chairs, the lines that separate us are only visible on a map.
Mm.
So if you're having an event this Saturday, call every county chair that surrounds your county to have us come out and support, especially in those heavily red places where you won't get a lot of
Hello.
Democratic support anyway. But then we'll all come to your event 2 weeks later. Like, we
Mm-hmm.
have to see ourselves as the state party.
Mm.
And not just, Union County, Cumberland County. We have to see ourselves as Democrats fighting together against the tyranny of the Republican administration right now at the national and the state level.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah,
mhm.
I was gonna say, like, I agree with that a lot. Like, I'm 5 minutes from Mecklenburg. I'm in Union County. I moved here in May of last year, and I kind of just got involved like right after Kamala was nominated. But I first volunteered in Mecklenburg, and then I was in Union, and then but it seemed like it was like almost like two different worlds. Like,
Right.
it was two different operations,
Mhm.
and then the other thing, when then I went to the Democratic meeting in county meeting November, right after the election, where Payron was given the debrief, and he was saying that oh shoot, lost my train of thought. I forgot
I
what
guess
you
I
were
was
saying.
saying nothing. I was saying clearly nothing that was worth a memory. No, I'm joking.
But no, I lost my train of thought. But I do remember, like, just kind of being
He doesn't remember. Yeah, but I remember what I was saying. I remember what I was saying. I was I was trying to let folks know that the election results and the amount of effort that was put forth was a bit disaggregated as a party. It was kind of it was disassembled. It was all over the place, right? It was kind of like, okay, we're going to do the coordinated campaign. Then also folks with inside of Union County were still unwilling to kind of cross paths. And Doc, I feel you on that point that we got to come together as one party, but it's kind of hard, is even as one county, we don't see each other as the same, right? If I'm on the more affluent West Side, I'm less willing to go to Monroe or to more Black folks, more Latino people, our Native American population.
Hmm.
I always tell folks, you can give people all the data points all you want to, you can give them all the graphs and charts. The one thing you can't manufacture is will. You
Mm.
have to be willing to say, like, I'm willing to center people who are more oppressed than me or less privileged than me, and I'm not going to speak over them. I'm going to listen to them as as a peer, as a Democrat like them, because guess what? We're fighting for them too. But I think we kind of get siloed in these sections, which then leads
Yeah.
to kind of my fiery speech that that's
Well,
when I first met
I know
Ron,
what you were.
actually.
Now I know
Oh,
what
here
I
we
was.
go. Here we
What
go.
the exact
Here's the
thought that was.
memory.
You said you came into your role thinking like, the national party is gonna, trickle it down to the state, and the state's gonna trickle it down to each county perfectly, and that's not how it worked. And in my mind, that's how I thought it would be too, right? So,
Likewise.
Same
Like,
here.
I mean, that's a thing that I learned too, because being in this position, not just in arguably the most important of the battleground states, but
Mhm.
during inarguably one of the most important elections that we were
That's right.
facing in our lifetime, meant that I thought the same thing. But the coordinated campaign, Harris team, like that's its own entity, and then you have the state party, which is its own entity, and then there are things that that coordination doesn't always happen. Like there, people would be surprised if there, someone, one of the principals, which would be like one of the say big wigs, if you would, like the President Biden, Vice President Harris, Michael Regan, Pete Buttigieg. If one of the principals was coming to the state, we didn't always know that
Yep.
right away as the
Hmm.
state party. That was a thing that the coordinated would know first, that we would get the information and we would try to get it out to the state, to the county parties. And so the idea, but there were so many people who, and I'm finding this out every day, that don't understand the structure of the party. and
Yes.
and and that's it's, I get like how it looks crazy. Like there's a House caucus and a Senate caucus, right? They physically have their office inside of Goodwin House, which is state party headquarters, but we're not the boss of them, right? Like they are their own entity. And in many ways, we want to collaborate. We have collaborated. I think there's room for us to do that even more, but everybody has a role to play. And so, but you call the name that and so when they're not happy anywhere across the state, they say NCDP, and I'm like, well, that's not us though. That's a
Right.
different thing. When folks after the election read that News and Observer article about this $40 million that did not go to all of the statewide candidates evenly, and they were particularly aggrieved that it didn't go to Jessica Holmes and Carolyn Thompson, to Braxton Winston, whose name we never seem to remember to call when we talk about Black candidates that didn't get as much support as they should have. That's not us. We found out about that through the article too. And so
Mm.
there are things that NCDP must do better, and I have definitely held us to account on as many things as I can, and I will continue to do that if I get reelected. But some stuff, like we can't. I'm all about sniper fire, not buckshot. Like shoot me when I'm wrong. Don't just shoot into the
Right.
crowd
Right.
and hope you get whoever is right. So
Right. Like,
so
Dr. Hardy, why don't you call for that ceasefire? So, well, I'm not the president. What are you talking about, man? Like, Dr. Hardy, why don't you fix my light bill? I was like,
But
what,
you'd be
man?
surprised. Like
Right.
literally, the party officers get emails from folks literally saying, "What are you all doing to stop?" Like,
Same
dear
here.
Dr. Hardy,
Hmm.
why aren't you, or when people were upset after Biden's debate with Trump,
Why
and
don't you prep him better?
right. I don't, I have my own thoughts on the debate, but whatever. But it was like, please, Dr. Hardy, tell Biden to step down. And I'm like, I don't know
Moi?
how important you guys really think I am, but I promise you I can't call Joe Biden right now. And
Right.
so, but I think what it is it makes sense that people would see us as the conduit that they see us as.
Right.
It's difficult to have to tell folks that that really isn't us, or that isn't something we can control, because we want to be able to do all of these things, but there
Hmm.
is only so much that we're responsible for or that we know about in advance or that we can control. Because I promise you, if we could control more, Kamala would have won North Carolina. Like, I mean, you know, like if I'm some magical influence, she'd be in the White House right now. We wouldn't be facing this existential threat. So, but yeah, there are a lot of things I learned. I can tell you, I also learned that there are folks who have given up on the process. Every time I talk about the 30 county tour, I like to talk about these two brothers I met at a housing project in Craven County. When I asked them, you know, the same thing I asked everybody, how come Black folks don't vote as much in this county as they used to? And they said, you know, we used to vote, but nothing ever changed. And so voting isn't something we have to do. It's something y'all want us to do. And like it's asking them if they will come help us beat up the bully down the street. That bully ain't messing with them. In their mind, that's a y'all thing. And so if from the first 18 counties that I went to, I looked up the numbers of registered Black Democrats that did not vote in 2020 and 2022 combined. That number was over 160,000 people. What that tells me is they no longer see the ballot box as a space where justice can be achieved, where their community gets its needs met. That is not their voice. And then you take something like what's happening in the Supreme Court race, where 60,000 of us, because I'm also on Jefferson Griffith's list.
Oh, you're on the list.
I'm on the list.
Wow.
Oh man, they were shooting high. They said we gonna get that Black one up there on that NCDP. We're gonna get her.
They got 64 of my students at FSU there are on the list. Wow. Allison Riggs' own parents are on that list. And it seems very, you know, willing. It was throw it at the wall and see what sticks. We are currently, NCDP is embroiled in 5 lawsuits about this in all these different ways. And I know what it is. They think they can just have us burn through money. And we are. This is expensive. This is taxpayer money, donors' money that's going to fight a race we already won by 734 votes. Like, it's ridiculous. But this is what they do when they can't win on their merits, and they can't, they cheat. And so if it's not trying to steal this election, then it's gerrymandering people's votes into oblivion. But people see this. And so it starts to erode the trust in the system. And so when you don't show up except for 2 weeks before the election, and they trusted you in the past and they voted and nothing ever changed, and now they see this massive power grab, or an attempt at one anyway, by Supreme Court justice candidates, there's a point at which they're like, this is messy. This has nothing to do with me. I'm struggling every day. Fighting this struggle with y'all is not going to fix mine. Just have at it. And that means that there are voices that have left the stage. But we know that there's some that are, you know, that are still gettable. You know, not everybody has given up hope, but we have to build genuine relationships, genuine community work. And that's where the work of county party chairs and precinct leaders are so, so important. I'm a precinct chair. You know, I mean, you know, what you all do at the grassroots level is that most granular level of leadership. It's the walk your dog leadership, I like to say, because you're going to be like, don't forget, we got the meeting tonight. Like, you know, these folks and they know and trust you. And so we need that kind of leadership. And I get it, but I'm so crestfallen that you're not going to be the Union County chair anymore. I don't know what to do with myself because you're so amazing at this. But I know you're not going to leave the playing field. And so I'm heartened by that.
No, not at all.
But, you
no
know,
question.
We do need to, and now it's election season for the locals. And so that is what I'm turning my attention to. Let's get those municipal leaders who can lead where they live. We need those folks. And you'd be surprised how many folks. I met this brother in a barbershop in Bladen County. I was told about him. So this is the best barbershop. Go, this guy knows everybody. So I go in, he is not expecting me. He doesn't know me. And so we get to talk. And I was like, have you ever considered running for like mayor or county commissioner? And he gets this big smile and goes, who, me? Nah. And I was like, I'm not the first person that told you that. He was like, no, I mean, they be saying that. And I'm like, you know, but I mean, there are people who don't even realize you're leaders already. I'm just trying to get you the title and the power that comes with it so you can have a bigger impact. So that's where my focus is on 2025.
Yeah, and a point that you brought up earlier that I think is something that we at least need to address as we move forward as a political apparatchiks is that, you know, you said those people, I forget the county you were talking about, but they said there was a lack of trust within, voting, and that's y'all problem. I mean, that's all by design. We have to
Right.
understand that like this is all a system.
Mhm.
And I know it's easy for us. I'll say the three of us are more privileged, Black folks, as it relates to the folks that we're talking about. But we have to understand that there's a reason why they don't know that. So there's a reason why they don't understand civics, right? The systemically,
Right.
the education system chose to not invest in that, not investing in education, not
Mhm.
investing in infrastructure, not investing in shaded communities and things. All of these things that leads to this apathy towards the political process. And I think when we just show up with you got to vote because it's going to get worse because the other people down the street are worse. Well, they're like, you know what? Like, I got enough food for myself today. I'm able to, get to my job. I don't like my job. I wish I could get paid more on my job. But they don't realize
Right.
all that too is politics. The reason where
Mhm.
you're living is politics. The reason that you don't have the education you have is because the reason you don't have access to a doctor is because of politics. But I
Correct.
think if we're not explaining it that way, we're just saying you got to vote. And I know you brought up Cynthia Wallace before we were started recording, who runs the New Rural Project. But that's
Mhm.
how I got involved locally when I moved to Union County 4 years ago. I got involved in the New Rural Project, and one of the questions she brought up, or one of the positions that she brought up when talking to folks at the barbershop was instead of asking voters, why don't you vote, ask them what's stopping you from voting.
I like that.
Because asking that question then starts to unveil and unravel the systemic and societal structural issues that are plaguing those people. It could be, man, I'm working three jobs.
Mhm.
I can't make it. I can't, or I don't think it's worth it because every time I do vote, X, Y, Z. And then you start to then you have a more nuanced and in-depth conversation with them, and you're not just
Mhm.
blaming them. Like, why don't you vote? And it's
Right.
like,
Exactly.
we're a country that has extremely low voting percentages to begin with. Every other industrialized or first world, white led nation has extremely high voter turnout compared to us, right? I
Correct.
remember when Macron almost lost to Marine Le Pen. Was it last year, the year before last? And they came in around 73% everybody voting. And I remember folks on the news here being like, oh, that's crazy that their lowest voter turnout. I'm like, we've never cracked 68% as a country, ever.
Mm.
We've never cracked 68%.
Ridiculous.
So as we're trying to say we're the big bad America and we're the
Mhm.
best, we're the number one, our voters are extremely repressed, white, black, indifferent, right? All of us are
Correct.
repressed. And if we actually had everybody show up, or if it was more obligatory voting, it might change some things. But
Correct.
I just want to just touch on that. Like that's all by design. If we don't have the
Mhm.
intellect, or if we're again going back to that will, if we don't have that willpower to say, hey, let me educate you on a more deeper level of why this is happening, but also I'm just, as you talking about black women earlier, I'm like, it's always put on us, the 14% of the population, to go above and beyond, right?
Correct.
To teach the masses, right? To
Mhm.
have the cultural moment. It's like I see why the 92% is like, you know what? I'm stepping back from the more
Listen,
performative organizing. We're still going to take care of ourselves, our community, but some of that performative shit, y'all can have that.
that part. That
So,
part.
so you mentioned like
Uh-huh.
about 160,000 registered black voters that didn't vote in the last two elections. Um,
Mhm.
how much
In
of
just
that?
18 counties.
Wow. How much
Mm.
of that would you attribute to voter disenfranchisement, or do you think that wasn't a factor at all in that number?
I mean, there's no way to have a number that big and not have some aspect of it be that, right? I mean, I know that when I went to Pasquotank, for example, I was talking to the county chair, and she's an older white lady, but all of her officers are older black folks. And so she was telling me, like, there's literal danger. Like, people are afraid to go and canvass. They don't want to knock on doors because they have very real threats against them. Then, there's people down in, I think it was Blatant again, where they were like, there's like four families, and everybody knows it. And
Mm.
everybody knows it. There's like four families that are kind of running that county, and they kind of keep a thumb on some stuff. And so people will not identify as Democrats, even though they'll register as Democrats, or vote as Democrats, but they'll register as unaffiliated, or they won't. There's a fear there that's like literal fear. There's some folks for whom this is just like you said, Payron. I cannot get there. I do not have time. I know Anson County. I was talking to their chair, Montgomery, Danny Montgomery. I love her.
Hmm.
She was talking about how the amount of time that the polls are open for early vote is so limited there. And they have folks who have to leave before, for work, to leave the county for jobs before the polls open, get back after the polls are closed. Like it is all by design. And so there's some of that. There's voter apathy. When I was in Lenore County, I went to this really fantastic Black-owned restaurant. And while I was waiting for the food, I asked these two sisters, like, have you all voted? What's keeping you all from voting, kind of thing, right? Like, why don't Black folks vote here? And she was like, I ain't never voted. And I was like, why? And she was like, I don't know. I just never have. And so for some
Wow.
folks, there's voter apathy. Some folks don't understand. Like, we'll be during the primary, we're like, okay, thanks for coming out to vote. See you in November. And they're like, what's November? And we're like, no, this was just the primary. This
Right.
And so and that's not just low information voters and low wealth voters are not always the same.
Correct.
And I think we make a huge mistake when we take for granted that people know what all of this stuff is. And so it was the first or second day of early voting when a colleague of mine came to my office, and we were having a conversation, and I had done a presentation the night before for the students on, like, my time at the DNC and that sort of stuff. And he was like, oh, it's so good that you did this. And somehow when we got to talking, I said, who's running for lieutenant governor? And he was like, oh, what's his name? I said, okay, let me say it again. Who's running for lieutenant governor on the Democratic Party? Yeah, it starts with a J. And I said, no, it's not a he, and it doesn't start with a J. It's like the average person just is not paying attention to these things in the same way. And we have to stop pretending like they are.
Right.
But then, like you said, Payron, there's some folks that just don't want to go to certain areas of their own county. And I'll hear things like, well, I don't think they want an old white guy to show up. I'm like,
oh, all the time. I hear that all the time.
Because
they don't want me, Payron.
I was about to say, but they're so excited to have this middle-aged Black woman show up, and these white
you go do it. You do it. You.
Okay. But I'm like, I get that there is an ease of familiarity expectation, right? That there's somehow you Black, they Black.
Mm-hmm.
Y'all gonna just
y'all know each other, right? You're all
be able to do it. We all know
Jay-Z and stuff, right? Beyonce, something.
But I'm like, A, that isn't necessarily true. And B, that doesn't necessarily mean that you can't also have that relationship with them. But there is an apprehension that I believe is sincere, but I don't think is explored enough.
No.
I think we need to do more. And I don't know who the we is on this, right? Because
I'm big on classifying we. When I hear we and us, I'm like, well, who's the us? Who's the we?
Correct.
Because it's very easy.
I would love for the party to do a thing, right? I would love for the party to host like one of these large Zooms or county chairs to do a thing or whatever. Because if what you need is some sort of, I don't know, education about how it's okay because you feel, I don't know, but I honestly think there's a point at which you need to go home and ruin Thanksgiving at your own house. You know what I'm saying? Like, I feel like these are conversations that need to be had inside of your house. Like, I don't want to be constantly, this is why I don't teach the diversity classes anymore. When I teach in social work, I've taught at UConn, I've taught at several places, and I'm always given, as the woman of color, I'm always given the
you do the diversity stuff, right?
Exactly. And I don't mind it. I love touching
right. No question.
But it is such an emotional lift to have to walk people
soul
through
murder.
issues
It's soul
of
murder.
Class. It is soul murder, like you said. It's
Bell Hooks said it, not
issues.
me. I didn't make that up. Bell Hooks said that.
You know, to be fair, listen, I'm an academic. I got to cite my sources. So I'm
Come on
citing
now.
you who cited Bell Hooks, but absolutely, let's give all those props to Bell Hooks. But like, there are class issues that are even within group.
Yep.
When are we going to have that TED Talk?
Not
all Black folk want to go talk to all other Black folk.
Correct.
Okay, so let's be real clear about that. But so there are class issues, there are race issues, there are age issues. There are so many issues that are keeping people from talking to one another. But I feel like these need to be internal conversations, because if you need to go figure out why you feel that way. You need to go figure out how come you feel like it's okay for me to go into certain white communities, but you don't feel comfortable going into all these other communities, be it African American, Latino. Either you are a part of the fight or not. And what I truly believe is that people can hear your heart. People
Yes.
can feel your intention. And
Mm.
so if you were there to be a bigot, they would know that. There'd be
Hmm.
something about the way that you comport yourself, the way you say things. Like, but if you come in with the spirit of, listen, I am probably going to get this wrong,
Yeah.
but all I'm here for is the fight. The fight is, the pain is not partisan, but it's also not racial. And
That's
that's what
right.
a lot of people on the right are finding out right now. And
Hmm.
so if we go into these communities and we talk, I get that the expectation is if it's your people, then you have an ease of communication, but that doesn't mean that you are absolved from the responsibility of going to those places as well. And
Mm.
so, but I don't feel like that's happening enough. And it needs to.
I was before we started recording, I was bringing up this story I was telling my wife over the weekend, because I was racking my brain, because I'm seeing a lot. We have our little Facebook groups for Union County. We have our little areas how we communicate, because we don't have mass communication. This is why we started the podcast, to start getting my thoughts out as the current chair, sometimes ending, but as the current chair, so folks can actually interact, see what I'm saying, how I feel, what positions I stand on, and which principles are important for me. But I was talking to my wife over the weekend about this idea of all of us just coming together. I'm hearing this a lot, especially from our more palm-colored friends, about like just all of us. We need to come together. We need to come together, and we need to come together to come together to come together. And I was like, it's been eating at me. Why this? Now we've been hearing this for years. This isn't a new thing, especially after an election loss, especially after maybe an abysmal performance, or whatever the case may be. But I'm like, why it's not landing with me? Because what is the Democratic Party? The Democratic Party is a political party. The Democratic Party is not a community. And I say that specifically because the Democratic Party is an umbrella of other communities. But
Correct.
in a moment like this, where there's fear and there's distress and there is a moment of hesitation, now folks who are not of our community want to say, "I'm a part of your community." And
Mm,
it's like, well, you're not a part of my because you don't care when black women are dying 4 times higher of maternal mortality. You don't care when there's the school to prison pipeline. You don't care when there's misdiagnosis. You don't care when we're getting redlined. But
that
now,
part.
when your community, I'm talking about to our palm colored friends, when
Mm,
your community showed their whole ass this election that it was about bigotry, racism, and white supremacy, now all of a sudden it's time for the Democratic community to build community. And it's like we are
mhm.
not a community because again, there's a reason why the three of us can talk the way we talk. There's a
Right.
reason why we've all had to code switch when we go into the workplace. There's a
Mhm.
reason why we know we had to have the conversation with our children about 10 and 2 when the cops pull you over. We have a certain language to survive. Those
Correct.
are the things of what a community is. And then now we're at this moment where folks are saying, we all got to come together. Well, we all don't have the same stake. We all don't have the same
Correct.
skin in the game. And so the
Right.
idea and then on top of that, you're telling me that you're also not going to get in the way of Uncle Ron at Thanksgiving. What value do you offer us?
Right. I mean, listen, I was telling you before we started recording too, I ran for the state house in 2020
Yeah.
and won the primary, lost the general in a gerrymandered district. And it wasn't by a lot. I mean, it was doable. It was
Mm,
it was like 1,200 votes. It was doable.
mm,
And yet, so I told you that the month after that, the Democratic women of Cumberland County said, "We want you to be our president." And so the outgoing president was this wonderful, wonderful white sister named Devin. And Devin brings me all the like presidential stuff in the tubby. And we're sitting in my garage and we're just talking. And she says, "It really pissed me off because I knew a lot of white Democratic women in your district who said," and I quote now, this is a
mm.
direct quote, "I know Kimberly's the better candidate, but I can't see myself being represented by a Black woman." And
What was
I,
that? Was that 1957?
right,
Is
right.
that
That's
when that was? That clearly that conversation couldn't have happened
it was
from the time of the
20,
iPhone.
2020. It was, and if you think about who was, and I showed you before, one of the newspapers from the
Mhm.
Fayetteville Press,
You got to back it
all
up a little bit.
these
Hmm.
amazing Black women that were running for office. And this is just a small smattering of them. There were so
Mm.
many. Cynthia
Who?
Wallace and Pat Timmons Goodson going for Congress. You had me and Dr. Francis Jackson and Dr. Amy Steele and so many others who were going for the state house. You had, or the Senate, including Sidney Batch, who was already in the House and was running for re-election. You had Yvonne Lewis Holly, who was running to be the first Black woman lieutenant governor. Jessica Holmes, who was just your state auditor for a minute, was
That's
running
right.
for commissioner of labor. Laura Cubbage, who was also running for Supreme Court, was running for the Court of Appeals. Like, we had all of these amazing, amazing women running for all sorts of things, mayor and everything. And at one point, we created our own community online on Zoom. We met every Thursday because remember, this was the election of COVID, so we were all running online. And at our height, we had about 18 to 20 Black women that would just drop in periodically. We were supporting each other and everything. And every single one of us lost, with the exception of DeAndrea Salvatore, who was running in a D plus, like a super blue district. Like, there was no way she was going to lose that race. Sydney Batch didn't even win re-election. Fortunately, she was able to get put into the Senate later on. That was great, and she's still there. But like, that's crazy. And these are women who were accomplished, women who had, you know, all the right stuff, all the degrees, all the everything. And even the ones that didn't, they had the passion.
That's right.
And we were out there and we were turnout machines, but it wasn't enough to get us elected. We didn't get the same amount of money as our white counterparts, especially white men. We didn't get the same kind of support. And when it came down to it, for me, it was these women who were like, I just can't see myself being represented by a Black woman. Fast forward a few years. Now the abortion ban, now we've got this reduced down to like 12-week abortion ban. And who's one of the faces at the podium that night when it got passed? The woman that beat me. And all I could think is, do you feel represented now?
Right.
But as soon as it happened, as soon as the Dobbs decision got leaked, we all met downtown so we could hold signs and have a rally. You wouldn't have had to do that at the state level, at least, had I been up there, had any of these other women been able to stand in that gap. And so we have to have honest conversations. I've been pressed into service since the election from counties who, like you, did a debrief. And there was one particular county that was like, hey, we really need you to come to the next meeting because, you know, the Black women were like, this was racism and sexism all day. But some of the white women were like, no, we just didn't have an economic message that
It was the economic, it was the eggs. It was the eggs.
It was the price of the eggs, right? And so I came to the meeting and there was someone who was staunchly, this was not racial, this was not, you know, and I said, listen, both things can be true.
That's
right.
right. That's right.
We can have, because I was in the same way. I kept saying, even when Biden was still top of ticket, there is only a certain population of people for whom the student debt loan forgiveness conversation makes sense.
Right.
All my friends who got their student loan debt forgiven have either a master's degree or a doctoral degree. Right. And you had to be eligible. You had to be paying it every year. I mean, so every month for 10 years.
For 10 years, right? 10 years. Yeah.
Right. This is not for the young lady that went to Miller Mott so she could get her license to be a masseuse. This is not for the kid that went to FTCC, the Fayetteville Technical Community College, to go get a CDL license. Like, we have to stop messaging to just middle class white folks. Like, we have to also, or just middle class folks.
Well, I think now we have 60 years of data now proving that, you know, it's never going to work. You know, we have now officially 1964, 1964 to 2024, we have 60 years of data that they are not going to vote for the Democratic Party.
Not if that message doesn't resonate. And if the policies, because messaging is one thing, policies are another thing.
Agree.
And so as much as yay, student debt loan forgiveness, though I myself have still got a student loan payment, whatever, because that felt very much like a lottery type of thing. And I'm glad that it was able to get done. That helps people, including people who look just like us, stop sending this money back to the feds and start doing things to invest in their own families, buying homes, putting that money back into the economy, their kids' education, saving for retirement, right? Whatever. So I'm glad that it happened. But we need policies that also speak to the guy I met in, I forget which county it was now, Brunswick County, who is cutting heads at a barbershop that's been converted into a barbershop. It was a single wide trailer. This brother did not want to talk to me at first at all. And I was like, I'm not leaving. One of y'all is going to talk to me. And he said, okay, I'm going to tell you my story. He said, I did a 20-year bid for drug charges.
Mm.
And I did, and while I was in there, I took classes. I know how to do electrical, I know plumbing, I do all this kind of stuff. And nobody will hire me. It's the only job I can do.
Mm.
And so I said, oh, well, we can get you, expunged. We can try to work to get this expunged. He said, no, because I caught a case first. There was a smaller charge. When I caught this
You
one,
only get one.
exactly. He says, so now I'm looked at like a trafficker. And so he says, so what's the Democrats going to do about that? And so I told him, I said, well, I happen to know a guy who just got off the Supreme Court who's running for governor, Justice Morgan. Let me see, I can talk to him. Let me call the Justice Center. And from there, I started talking to county chairs like, you know what? We should do some expungement clinics. See, this is what I'm talking about, Payron. You said, and rightly so, the Democratic Party is a political party, right? It's not a community. But see, that's not something that has to continue to exist in that way. We should be doing relational organizing. We should be engaged in constituency services. We should be meeting the needs of the people on the ground right where they are. And so if we look at ourselves as a political party, then we only do political things. I tell people all the time, they're only voters when the ballots are printed. But right now, when there are no ballots, they are our neighbors. They're our community members. They're the parents of our kids' friends at school. They're the folks that we work with. They're the folks we shop with, right? And so we need to be meeting the needs of those folks right now, every day. We need to be present for them and creating a community every day. And so that's the work I see the state party being able to do, but also the county party. My precinct, we held a school supply drive. Now, literally, no one came out, but I also live in a super red precinct, so I'm not even surprised by that.
Well, that's good. I'm glad.
Right. So we took our stuff and took it down into Fayetteville and gave it to some schools where the kids, we knew they really needed that. But you need to do these things all the time, right? Go ahead, Rom. I'm sorry.
No, I don't want to, I'm kind of, before you get too far, but one of the things you mentioned was, messaging is very centric to the middle class. And I think even me, like the middle class, like I was talking to Payron, I think like maybe on our first episode, and I was like, Kamala Harris had the plan with like black men to start a business, get a house. And he's like, Payron's like, yeah, but that doesn't really resonate with the working class. Like they're not really thinking about it. That's not an opportunity that's like immediate to them. And I said, you got to put, when you put that into perspective, I'm like, yeah, that's true. And I remember I had a conversation right after I moved here to Charlotte. There was at a cybersecurity conference, and I was at the bar talking to, she was a black woman. We were chopping it up and she was pouring it up, and we were talking, and she's like, yeah, I'm going to vote for Kamala Harris, but I'm not that excited about it. She's like, and I was, asked her why. She's like, she doesn't talk about like, no Democrats, or she is not talking about working class or poor, working poor. So it doesn't really like excite me. There's nothing really there for me. And I was like, damn, that's real. Like, I think it is important to maintain that perspective, right? Because especially like, myself, I'm like stay involved in all the politics, and even like what you were saying about Allison Riggs. I mean, Allison Riggs, like we understand like there's a big threat in terms of like overturning an election, but like most people are just going about their day, like thinking about the Supreme Court, North Carolina Supreme Court justice, and this, if you ask me a couple years, even as political as I am, a few years ago, like what is the state Supreme Court, I'd probably be like, I don't know. Like,
Right.
And this is me as like an avid political person. Yeah.
Yeah, don't listen. Anybody watching and listening, please don't feel bad about not knowing, because it's not like there's a master class getting taught every Tuesday, like and it needs to.
Right.
It's something that we definitely need to do. But speaking to the economic issue, I got a lot of reporters this last election cycle would call and go, hey, we hear you're doing a lot of work with Black voters. We know that reproductive justice is a huge issue. Is that what you're hearing down East? And I said, no, the message down East is economic. I said it over and over and over again. Now, let me tell you something. A woman who is a single mom, who has struggled to feed 2 kids, but found a way to do it, will struggle and find a way to feed 3. Okay. That's the problem, isn't that there's an additional mouth to feed. I mean, the reproductive justice is important. I want every woman out here to understand that, because it's not even just abortion. It's abortion care in case of an emergency. It's child. We could talk all day. So I want that to be an important issue. It is. But what I was hearing, those are what if issues. Okay. Those are down the road issues for somebody. But I got to feed these kids tonight.
I keep a
Right.
roof
And
over
so
over our head today.
I need to feed the roof tonight. And
Mm-hmm.
so, and I told you, I'm a social worker. I am a
Mm.
social worker first. And so that's why every time I went to a county, the one place I went to, if there was a food pantry or a homeless shelter, I was going there because that's the great equalizer.
Mm.
The homeless shelter don't have a Republican door and a Democratic. Everybody walking in because it's gotten so bad economically that they don't know where else to go.
Well,
And so,
and I don't mean to cut you off, but I think to that point though, like I think that's to Ram's earlier point of what we were talking about episodes ago. That I think has been missing from the party
correct.
is I mean Dr. William Reverend Dr. William Barber has been talking about this the Poor People's campaign. That 64% of voters are either at the poverty line or below the poverty line. Like that's a huge swath of voters that we could be talking to. But if the party itself is still talking about this neoliberal, bootstraps and corporations and run your business and here's my billionaire over here and we're gonna,
Right.
we're gonna invest in it. It's like, okay, well, you're not talking to the people who are the lifeblood of all these corporations, because even if it's just a Dollar General, that which we know is exploitative and to help to add
Correct.
to food deserts, our labor there is what drives that multi-billion-dollar corporation, even if
Exactly
it's
right.
if it's in a podunk town. So I just think when we're choosing to not, and George Orwell, who wrote 1984, he has a really good quote that he was getting interviewed years ago, well, many years ago, clearly, but he said that beware of people or the political party that's unwilling to criticize capitalism, because they'll be absolutely quiet during when there's the presence of fascism. So
Exactly.
and I think that quote has always stuck with me, because that has been applied to, I think, the modern version of the Democratic Party, where we're almost touting the idea of this neoliberal, politics and the business class and this middle class, but never the working class, because we're all
I'm gonna
workers. The three of us are workers.
right. This is all we're all and all labor has value.
Correct.
Okay. All
Correct.
labor has value. And so I'm gonna say a thing in a second that's gonna make you mad. And I'm excited because I want to see your reaction to this thing I'm gonna tell you as pertains to this.
Yeah.
But around this economic message, what I would tell these journalists is that the economic message can be disaggregated into a lot of things. So there are no jobs where I live out here in the country. And
Yep.
so there's that. There's jobs, but they don't pay anything. Oh, there's a
Underemployment.
job and the pay
Mhm.
is pretty good, but it's not full time. So I still don't have health care. Oh,
Mm.
there's a job and it pays really well and it's full time, but I don't have childcare that I could actually afford.
Mm.
Or I don't have a way to get there because there's no public transit and I don't have my own personal vehicle. Or they won't hire me because I have a nonviolent felony on my and I can't get it expunged. Or. And so, like, we're still talking about trying to raise minimum wage. Like, this is madness because when you talk about the poverty line, I want everybody to be real clear that Miss Orshansky, who created the poverty line, did not intend it to be used the way it's been used. And we have been using that. So the poverty line isn't even real. There are people
Mm.
who are making more money than that poverty line who are still not able to feed their kids every day.
The working
Right.
poor.
And don't even get me started on people in the gig economy. I waited
Mm.
tables when I was in college, right? 213 an hour plus tips. You're a college student. Okay, you might can get by on that. There are people trying to feed their families and pay their rent and their light bill on 213 an hour plus tips. Even 725 an hour is ridiculous.
That's right.
And you got teachers leaving the classroom because Sheets is paying them more and they get more support. Like that's insane. And so if we don't start talking about the economic issues, and so that's why I told the woman in that one county where we did the debrief, both things can be true.
Right.
There are definitely people that didn't vote for Kamala Harris because she's a woman of color. There are people that didn't vote for her because she is a woman. There are people that didn't vote for her because my granddaddy rolled over in his grave. We knew how to vote for a Democrat. We all know that's true.
Mm-hmm.
And also, if we do not have a conversation with these folks who are struggling every day, then we are not going to win them over. They are not going to come out and support us because they can't, because they're too busy dealing with the day-to-day life. Now, I ran for House in 2020. So I told you I was going to say something was going to make you mad. So get through the primary. And that particular year, the House caucus gave all of us our people, right? Here's your campaign manager, here's your vendors and all that kind of stuff. Fortunately, I fought and won to keep my campaign manager from the primary, but we had to use the vendors that they had pulled together for us. They had negotiated so that it wouldn't cost us as much to use their services. Fine. We get the data on who my voters are, who the people are in House 43. And so that everybody knows, everybody has if you've ever voted once, you have 2 scores from the DNC. Your support score, the likelihood that you're going to vote for one party or the other, and your turnout score, the likelihood that you're going to vote at all. And they go from 0 to 100. They wanted to send the mail pieces, those pieces of mail y'all get in your mailbox. Oh, that's lovely. Okay, whatever. And you throw that in the trash at night. Those are really expensive.
Very expensive.
They're so expensive. And so they wanted to send them to people with a 70 to 100 turnout score. That number was smaller than the people who had a 40 to 69 turnout score.
Right. It always is.
So I said, well, why won't we send it to them? Because clearly,
right,
70 to 100 is coming out. And the guy who was the vendor for the mail, MAIL, for the mail pieces, and I like the guy, but totally missed my whole mark.
Right.
And again, a direct quote, well, it's kind of a waste of time and money because they never come out to vote. And I said, they probably don't come out to vote because you see them as a waste of time and money.
Right. It's kind of there in the title there, what you're saying.
Like, what is that? Right. Like, and so from that point forward, since I couldn't control where the mail went, I could only control where I went. I canvassed and continue to canvass in the 40 to 69. Those are the folks who 40 to 69% of the time are going to choose the couch because no one's ever even taken the time to come out and talk to them.
Right.
Some of them would go out and do it if they just had a little bit of information. Somebody came and said, because I remember going to a guy's door in the heart of the hood, got my mail piece here. I'm walking with a woman who was running for the court. And so we were looking for who ended up being his grandmother. So he's like, oh, she's not here. She lives with my mom now. And so we're like, well, have you voted yet?
Yep.
He was, oh, no, I don't vote. I'm 45. I ain't voted since I was 18. So I was like, come on, bro. And so we having a whole conversation. So we were like, well, okay, at least give your grandmother our lit pieces and tell her. So he's looking, he goes, this is y'all. And I'm like, that's what I'm saying. Like, we came to you to ask you to vote for us. And he said, I've been living in this neighborhood 30 years, something. He said, ain't nobody ever knocked on my door. Ain't nobody ever knocked on my door. And it was blazing hot. He said, y'all out here in this heat, much respect. He goes, I might vote for y'all. And we were like, oh, right?
Come on, man.
If you just go out there, and if you don't just do it once, you have to, these are relationships. None of us would be in relationships with someone who showed up once every 2 to 4 years.
I think
it's very similar. The last election, my wife was canvassing. It was me, her, and our daughter, who was at the time. She was 3. She just turned 3, and it was just very similar. Like we went to the hood here in Union County, in one of the spots outside Monroe, and it was hot, and it was the projects, and but of course we Black, so we fine to walk around.
That's
and
right.
and we walked up to a porch, there's a lady on porch, about three folks with her. She's smoking a cigarette, and she's like, we basically like, what y'all want? And I got my wife's shirt on. She has her shirt on. She says, "Look," like, that's cute little baby you got there. And I was like, yeah, my wife's running for office. My wife does her whole stump speech and just kind of spiel. Then we start just talking. And then very similar, like, again, nobody shows up here. But I remember myself canvassing the year before that area by myself. As a Black man, just walking by myself, knocking doors, hanging lit, doing stuff. And it's just this level of like, you got to care about those people. And, I've heard Anderson say this, that you can't organize folks you don't love. You can't, but also not organizing, but folks won't come out for folks you don't love on.
Correct.
And there's just that level of like, I don't think people see that. And I think there's
Right.
it's this transactional nature to what politics has become, instead of realizing politics is just an extension of the war that's being waged on us. It is just in a polite way.
Right. I tell people all the time, you cannot organize. You cannot energize who you do not organize, and you cannot organize who you don't know. And so, like, we're getting ready to do precinct organizing around the state in mid-March. And I know that there are places in Mecklenburg, and there's places everywhere that are not organized. And we have the organizing period for the purposes of the convention. But you can organize a precinct anytime
year round. Yep.
And I ran into so many people that did not realize that you could do that. And it just takes 5 people. But if all you do is give 5 names on a piece of paper and leave, that is not going to do anything for turnout. You have to do stuff locally with those folks and keep them apprised. And sometimes, it feels like you're spitting in the wind, like nobody is going to be affected by this at all, but you'd be surprised. And so,
That's what I think. That's what we fight against here in Union. I think there's a lot of that on paper organizing,
mhm,
and I mean, this isn't calling anybody out, but it's just that, I mean, we've talked about it in our meetings, we've talked about it interpersonally, we've talked about it as a leadership strategy, and because when the rubber hits the road, you need that organizing power. You need, but so then we call on these folks and they're like, oh yeah, I ain't done nothing since y'all organized me in February of last year. And it's like,
right,
so there's a level of like, and I work a full-time job. My wife works full-time. We got two little kids. Like, I'm not calling each precinct every week. Like, did you have your meeting?
right.
So we do have folks that are hopefully our staff or folks that work with us to do some of that organizing work. But like,
Mhm.
it is, it's like trying to eat the elephant. You got to do it one bite at a time.
Correct. Correct. Rom, you look like you're about to say something.
No, it's the other part of the battle when you have those conversations, especially like when it's close to election day, is getting those folks to register to vote, and motivating them. How do you is that how do you kind of get bridge that gap? Like they all of a sudden there's a light, there's maybe some hope, and but actually getting people to register to vote, especially that late in the game,
Mhm.
because like you were saying, like year round, it's important to stay engaged. And I was canvassing, and this was like what Kamala ran for just over 100 days. And I ran into a couple people, one man, black man who wasn't registered to vote, and he said he was going to register. I went back to his door. He's like, yeah, he's like, my girlfriend's taking me Friday. I'm going to register. I never went back because I didn't want to know if he did or didn't. Like, honestly, like it would kind of break my heart if he didn't. And then
Right.
another woman, like it was like the Sunday before the election day, and she's like, oh, can I still register to vote? And I'm like, no, you can't. It
Mhm.
was yesterday. Like, so I
Mhm.
just those little opportunities is like, and so I think that's part of, like, to me, like, and so more of a, I guess, an outsider. I haven't been a precinct or a county chair, not a precinct chair
I
yet.
think he may step up. He may step up to be precinct chair.
Yeah.
So
Oh, yeah. I think I'm supposed to get
Love
something
it.
in tonight, but like, it's from an outsider perspective, it seems like there's an opportunity to get people who historically haven't voted. And when you look at the demographics, like, the 92% and the 78 or 80%, and if you get those people to register, that's going to go in your favor. So I mean, I don't know. It just seems like there's an opportunity, and Democrats seem to shy away from it, or and I know, like, even when I was in Mecklenburg, they said the strategy was to get out the vote, the people who didn't vote last time. um
Mhm.
and I think that strategy didn't work. I don't know exactly why, but the numbers didn't really improve over 2022, 2020. So it's got to try something different.
So
um
I know. So I'm sorry. Go
no,
ahead.
go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, because so the C3 organizations, right? So again, for the benefit if anybody doesn't already know this nerdy political jargon, these are the nonpartisan organizations, right? Like your Common Cause, your, NC Alliance, Democracy NC. Those are the ones that say vote because it's very important. Where the C4, the political parties get to say vote for the Democrats, right? Like, so that kind of thing. And so we do a
hmm
lot of, voter registration stuff at the more the county party level. Like colleges will have voter registration tabs and stuff. But that is definitely work that we recognize is valuable for C4, or C3s, like the D9. I'm a Sigma Gamma Rho. I would love to see my sorors out there, twice, two, three, four times a month, going out to different communities, registering folks to vote, telling them what the issues are. And that doesn't have to be partisan. You can tell somebody what the issues are without
Right, right.
breaking those rules. And
hmm
so, all you're doing is, like, when I was over Dim Women in Cumberland County, it was still going, the COVID was still going on, but the governor had lifted the restriction where we could lit drop, but we couldn't canvas. Like, he didn't want us talking at the doors, but we could drop stuff at the doors. And I said, you know what we're going to do? We're going to do one issue a month. We're going to write it in plain English, and we're going to answer 3 questions. What
hmm
exactly is the issue? How exactly does it affect you? And what exactly can you do about it? Now,
Mm.
as a researcher, by convention, we don't write anything above the 6th to 8th grade level because you just
Mm-hmm.
never know what somebody's comprehension level is. And
Sure.
we went to the 40 to 69 and we dropped it on their door for 3 months in a row. We were like, here's the issue. This
Mm.
is why it should matter to you in English, not
Mm.
in jargon, not in
Right.
acronyms,
Right.
so that folks, and who knows, maybe by the time they get to the polls several months later, they got a stack of these things going, wait a minute, I know that issue because the
Yep.
Democratic women told me, that's a thing that nonpartisan groups can do too. So it doesn't just stop at registration. It has to continue to be engagement and education. I mean, it's the same thing in my classes, right? My students can register for class, but if they don't show up, they're going to
Mm.
fail. If
Well,
they're not engaged, they won't learn, right? And so I want folks to, I get your point. Like, we definitely need to make sure we're doing voter registration and consistently.
Right.
North Carolina is growing all the time. And so all those people coming into the state need to register, right? But on top of that, let's go back and knock on those folks' doors and make sure they know why they're voting and what they're voting for.
so you mentioned your students. I did have a one question on YouTube from Lee Coulter. She also ran for NC House. She was also wondering what is the top line concern of your students right now.
Oh,
Mm.
wow. Wow, that's a good one. Um, for the students who are engaged, and unfortunately, sort of writ large, that is not the average college student anymore. But for the students who are engaged, they are very concerned about things like student loan debt, right? Will I be able to get a job that I will be able to live on when I graduate? Because otherwise, this is just a knowledge for knowledge sake sort of situation where, I got the degree because I'm supposed to go to
Gotta go
college, right?
right.
That's what everybody told them in high school. You got to go to college to get a good job. First of all, I am a professor who does not believe that everybody needs to go to a 4-year school.
Yep.
I have seen students sit in my classes and other classes and struggle because what they really want to do doesn't have anything to do with this place, but they were told that the path to prosperity is a 4-year degree. And it's not. There are trade schools and technical schools and apprenticeships, and there's so many other ways that people can be. And what I tell you at the top of the hour, all labor has value.
That's right.
And so, oh, I've got a PhD, but when my car's alternator went out a couple of weeks ago, I was
You don't
like,
need a mechanic.
there was nothing I could do to pontificate on the alternate. I had to get somebody
Right.
for
Right.
whom this is a passion, right? And so, and paid him well. And so,
Mm-hmm.
like, there is a way to live well and not get a 4-year degree. And so, but if you're going to, it's got to be able to pay off in the end. Because I also teach in HBCU, naturally, there are issues around like this racial strife.
That's right.
Brothers getting killed in the street. Am I going to live long enough to make this degree matter?
Mm-hmm. And we got a white supremacist in the White House. They're being emboldened right now. I mean, these are things that we're seeing.
Exactly.
And honestly, some of that political ease, even if you're in college and we work for me and Ron work for corporations, like we know that all that shit is not going to help us in our day-to-day lives, right? Like we have real fears that we have to communicate to our families, to our children, to my brother over here, Ron. He back to me our fears and wants of these threats. And it's like sometimes I think we like to just churched up in all these kind of like, oh, these political talking points. It's like that doesn't resonate with again the majority of the base.
Correct. And that's another thing too, is the students don't have a traditional media diet, right? Their social media algorithms do not include. I mean, maybe they got Jeff Jackson because he was the most followed politician on Twitter. But for the most part, when I asked the other day, now mind you, I teach a community organizing class, a research methods class, and a graduate level social welfare policy class. And when I asked them who watches even the local news 3 to 4 times a week, nope. National news, nope. Certainly not cable news, nope. Does anybody read the paper? Like, where are you getting your information? And
TikTok.
so they're getting it from TikTok. And again, those are algorithmically based platforms. And so if I'm looking for it, it will find me. But if I'm not looking for it, it's what I heard and somebody said, and isn't it true? When I did a barbershop tour in Greenville on the last day of early voting before election day in this cycle, went to 4 different barbershops. Me and Dr. Raymond Smith, who was running for Senate, and some local candidates and stuff, went to 4 different ones. I went to this last one, And 3 different guys, unrelated to each other, at 3 different points at the time that I was there, was like, didn't she lock up all these brothers when she was doing that thing out in California? And I was like, okay, let me fix that sentence for you. Okay.
Right.
So, but that's what they heard somewhere, and it went like wildfire. And so every time I turned around, I was like, or Trump wrote me a check. No, he did not. Right. And so you have to sit and unpack. So this is why you can't show up in 2 weeks before the election. You can't unpack that nuance in one visit 2 weeks before the election.
Well, I mean, but to that point, it's funny, again, post-election, we see the election results, but I remember, folks like doing stuff like what you're doing, stuff that I was doing in the Black community. That's community work. And
That's
even
right.
though we're wearing the cape of the Democratic Party, that cultural competency that we have and that cultural familiarity is what gets us in the door, and to be
Right.
able to have conversations that resonate with these people.
That's
But
right.
again, I think also post-election, we talk about some of that community work that some of our palm color friends need to do. They were not having those conversations.
Correct.
They felt emboldened. They felt okay to just stand next to us as we're having those conversations with our people. And it's like, again, I try to remind people we're only 14% of the demographics of this country, or population of this country, but we're only even less of the electorate. We're only
Right.
11% of the electorate. So when we talk about the Black vote being high, it's 11 pennies out of that dollar. If it's 100, if
I
the
like
if the electorate is 100 pennies, we're only
That's
11
right.
pennies. That's from crazy Mark Robinson to
Uh,
leftist Peyron Baxter. We're only 11 pennies. So
right.
when folks want to lay this at the feet of Black men, we know Black men voted more for. We're talking about 1.6% of all Black men in this country, but we're not
Right.
going to put Donald Trump on Black
Right.
men, right? So
Exactly.
there's just this narrative that is easier to consume instead of face reality, that we've always been doing the community work.
Right.
When we're out in the streets of 2020, there's no group of people that's more law and order than Black people. When the cops break the social contract and they broke the law, we're in the streets to demand
Mhm.
order.
Right.
Right, but they say that you're the thugs. So there's a level of this cultural conversation that we need to have. We're run up on time, but I'm asking these last couple of questions here
Okay.
about bridging that racial divide, because I get a
Mm.
lot of the happy talking. We just got to do again all these task oriented things, but we're not having the real conversations with some of that stuff y'all need to be having. Because when it came down to the showing up for when it matters for all of us, not just for Black people. People didn't vote for Kamala Harris because she's Black. I voted for Kamala
Right.
Harris because I'm Black, and I know
Yes.
who would be the best person for me, right? Women didn't vote for Kamala Harris because she's a woman. You voted for Kamala Harris because you're a woman, and you
Exactly.
knew that what was going to be on the other side of that is this crazy fascist, racist, white supremacist
Mhm.
who put you in the dirt, or make you, or put you back on the plantation. So there's a level of like, there's a comfort with like having us as ornaments, especially people like myself
Mm.
and you, Dr. Hardy, in these positions. And I think Ruha Benjamin, when she went down to, I believe it was Howard at the commencement ceremony, who said, Black faces in high places will not free us.
That part.
And we got to be real about that,
We
because
got to be real about that.
because I had explained to my board of chairs that whenever a Black person shows up in these spaces, we are showing up as disruptors,
That's right.
because these spaces were not created for us to ever be here. I try to
That.
remind people the Democratic Party existed when there was legalized apartheid in this country, right? The
Correct.
Democratic Party existed when there was slavery, right? So
Mhm.
all these things existed prior to us being here. So now we're here, we're giving you our lived experience. And guess what? The people close to the pain are always close to the solution.
Exactly.
That brother at that barbershop told you, hey, what I'm dealing with is X, Y, and Z. Can y'all fix that?
Mhm.
That's a plan that would help millions of people, not just Black people. And that's why
Right.
we show up. And I just kind of get frustrated with that. The idea of like, you need to do more. And it's like, Dr. Hardy was doing that. Peyron Baxter was
Right.
doing that. Ron was doing that. And guess what? Y'all weren't doing that. And y'all are
Listen.
70, y'all are 71s of that 100 pennies. Y'all are
Right.
71 pennies. So we're 11
First of all, I
pennies.
think y'all's podcast needs to sell merch, and there need to be 11 pennies across the front. I think that would be dope. I will buy the first one. I promise
11
you that.
penny club.
The
Right.
11 penny club. Donate to support these brothers. Donate your 11 pennies today, right? Like, I
There
think
you
buy
go.
the shirt.
Right.
Buy
You
the
can
shirt.
save a podcast with 11 cents a day.
And we'll have Melissa Etheridge singing in the back or whoever. So here's the thing. The way to bridge the racial divide starts with acknowledging that there is one.
Mm.
And I think that well-intentioned, liberal white folks don't want to have that conversation.
Mm-mm.
I think we also learned a friend of mine, matter of fact, one of my friend of mine, she's a fellow social worker, she's a white woman. She said the worst thing for like genuinely liberal white folks to hear is for somebody to call us a racist. They said we hate that, we are not
Right.
that, and there are things like implicit bias.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody's saying you're MAGA.
Right. You're a Klansman. Right.
Exactly. But sometimes there is the sin of omission as well.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Mm-hmm.
you're not talking, and I know it's an uncomfortable conversation,
No
but
question.
imagine what it's like to live it. I just want you to talk about it.
That's it.
I just want you to talk to your spouse about it. Talk to your uncle about it. I just want you to say, I met this lady and she's amazing. Kamala Harris was, without a doubt, the most prepared candidate for president we've ever had. She was amazing regardless of being Black. She was amazing regardless of being a woman. We should have voted for Kamala because she was the better candidate. But yet there are people who made that decision to not vote for her based on race, based on gender, based on nonsense. And I'm just saying, you know some of those people.
Because we don't.
They're not my
circles. They're
I
not my
don't
family.
know one person, and admittedly, they probably wouldn't want to tell me because they know I'd give them the what or. But I don't know anybody that didn't vote for Kamala. Hell, I probably know more people that didn't vote at all.
True that.
Vote for Kamala. And so if they went in that ballot box, and here's the thing, we voted for all of y'all.
That's
the
right.
farmers that I saw on YouTube yesterday, talk about I'm about to lose my farm. The Latino community who's like, my family is
he betrayed
deported.
us.
Right. I mean, I'm like, first of all, he told y'all the loud part out loud. But we tried to save you. Black folks been trying to save everybody because we know what it's like.
That's right.
And so we need everybody to have that conversation. And so if you need talking points, I tell you what, like I said, I have taught the diversity class a lot, and there's a reason for that. I am a safe landing space for people who are trying to learn how to have these conversations in ways that are authentic and sincere, and so that you don't say the thing that's going to offend. But again, if you are coming with sincerity, people will hear that. I can't have that conversation. I talked to the chair of Duplin County, and I said, I was a white guy, older white guy, and I really wanted to go and talk to his hog farmers. And he said, they're not going to talk to you, miss. I was like, well, why not? And he said, because they think that all of these farm subsidies and all of these, and this, crackdown on them because of the hogwash and all that kind of stuff is an indictment of them and a benefit to Black farmers. They're not going to say the same thing to you they said to me. Melvin Williams, the state party secretary forever and ever and ever until he don't want it no more, was on a candidate call that the Guilford AFAM caucus had for us the other night. And they asked him about this divide between Black voters and white. And he said, let me tell y'all something. I've lived in Duplin my whole life. He said, when I'm around white folks, they don't say the same things to me they say to y'all. He said, and a lot of them like the racism. They feed off of that. They feel important when they are talked to in that way. He said, but they're never going to say to you the same things they say to me. And so what I'm asking folks to do, I'm in my community. I'm in the housing projects. I'm in the fancy Apple. I'm everywhere.
Yep.
I need you to be in your everywhere, in the spaces I can't get to. Some of y'all sleep next to power every night and don't have these conversations. And as a party and as a country, we are not going to get there solely off of the labor of the Kims and the Payrons and the Roms. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. So if we can go have our community talk about why you need to vote for Josh, okay, instead of Mark, then you can go have your community say why.
Because that was a narrative, right? Oh, but Mark's a Black man and Black people are so stupid. All they're going to do is they're all going to fall in line and vote for Mark Robinson.
Exactly.
I was shocked having that conversation with Democrats. Like, do you think, but also I remember this stat that 91% of white people don't have any Black friends. So if you're only informed of us through music and television shows and media and movies, you will think that whatever the narrative is, the stereotype of us is the truth. And that played out in this election. Again, like we're always gonna be, again, I go back to what I was saying, we are not the Democratic Party is, and I'm gonna push back on that a little bit. We're not a community, but we are a collection of communities. We have to be able to say that because there is a poor community, there is a middle class. Those are all also communities, right? But
Mhm.
also we can't separate class from race because one was
Correct.
always meant to inform the other.
Correct.
And last question I got here for you.
Okay.
We asked this, and I know we're well over on time, but this was a
Sorry.
fantastic conversation. Thank y'all for listening. If you're still here, thank you again. But
Thank you.
the party's brand. We asked this question to Anderson too.
Mm,
There is a brand problem, I believe, right?
mm,
That even though locally we can be as vibrant and robust as Dr. Hardy, but also there is still this kind of stench that lingers with the Democratic Party, just because some folks, as we said earlier in this episode, they're only paying attention to the bits and pieces they get on social media, the bits and pieces they turned on the news in the morning before they went to work, and they hear Joe Scarborough saying, "Well, the Democrats are too woke," and that's all they got. And then they go to
right.
work for 8 hours. Then they come
Right.
home and they're like, "Hold on, I did see a rainbow flag. Are the Democrats too woke somewhere?" So like that brand, I think, does impress upon people at the local level that
Mhm.
we may be more disaggregated, because I've always said that our white-led, corporatized entertainment media complex is an arm of the state. It's always been an arm of the state. This is why it wasn't until 2021 they stopped calling Tulsa a race massacre. They had to say it was a white supremacist violent massacre.
Correct.
So we can't forget that. I think sometimes we forget, oh, it's MSNBC, it's CNN. Don't These are led by billionaires who want to keep
Right.
their taxes low and who want to keep the hierarchy of this country going. So that brand issue. I mean, we talked about earlier about the middle class, and not saying working class, and not talking about the poor, not talking about racial issues. Kamala
Mhm.
Harris not one time said she was black. Not one time said she was woman, because the consulting class said, we got to get these white women in these areas, and we actually lost it
Mhm.
in that category. We lost 2% of white women across the country. There were suburban white women. So there's a level of like that brand. Like, I guess let me start here. What is the brand of the Democratic Party in your opinion?
I think, well, in my opinion, well,
And
so
you can take your hat off of the second vice. I'm talking
right.
to Kim a
No,
little
no,
bit.
I will take it with me
We're
everywhere I
deep
go.
in the episode. I don't think anybody's gonna dig this deep if it's for your
No,
real answer.
if you're still listening at this point, like you are
Mhm.
all in, right? And that is great. But this is just a really great conversation. So you should still be here. Um, I will say that so in May of 23, and I get emotional even now thinking about it, we lost somebody in this state who was
Mm,
so important in the political space, Conan Morgan. And I will do
mhm.
everything I can to make sure his name stays in this space.
That's right.
But I remember having a conversation with him one day where he said, "What are we selling, Kim? What's the party selling?" And I was like, "We are selling," and I was all in hope and justice and all this, because I believe in those things, right? I can't not believe that there is a path forward. I know it's easy to doom scroll
Mhm,
and to just throw your hands up and just be like, there is just nothing we can do, especially now.
mhm.
Now, when you got all these people 20 years working for a federal agency and they got told over email at 5 o'clock Friday night, you ain't got a job no more. That's nasty.
By Elon Musk. Yeah.
Right, by President Musk. Um, I said what I said. And I wish the media would start doing that more because it
Right.
drives Trump crazy. I love
Right.
that.
Right.
It's so emotional and thin skinned. But, and I do believe that part of that is that. But I think we get ahead of ourselves in this moment. I think
Mm,
what this moment calls for is a conversation at the community level,
mhm.
not at the consultant level, not
Mm,
at the congressional level. We need to go talk to the people.
right.
I am of the ilk. That's why I did the listening tour. And that's why I wanted the candidates to come. Their message should have incorporated, and for some it really did, what they heard the people say. So if I'm running for Supreme Court, right? I heard a thing, my office can do that.
Mhm.
Meanwhile, Ben Clark and Rachel Hunt running for LG, oh, I hear a thing, my office can do that. Mo Green running for superintendent of public, oh, I heard a thing, my office can do that.
Mhm.
I think that what our brand needs to be is community based.
Mm,
Because if you let us do it at the 30, 60, 90,000 foot level, it'll keep being what it's been.
right.
And so if you ask some people, they'll say, oh, it's y'all keep losing. Melvin likes to say that the Democrats are the comeback kids. We lose for a bunch of years and then we fight our way back. And I'm tired of that. And
Right.
then when are we gonna win that? And I love
Right.
Melvin. Melvin is the eternal optimist for Democrats,
Sure.
right? But I don't think we should sit with ourselves and have a conversation about our brand. I think we need to do what I tell my students in my community organizing class on day one. Go into those folks' communities and ask them what they need. Ask them what they want us to do. We'll go execute. But if you're executing on a plan you created, and I know we're on time, but I want to give this example because I gave this example the other day in class.
Yeah.
I got my undergrad and my doctoral degree from Morgan State, HBCU,
Okay.
the best HBCU in the world, whatever, up in Baltimore, Maryland, right? And so there's this neighborhood in Baltimore called Park Heights. Park Heights was the hood back in the day. And there was this community group came in and built a playground, got like loads to donate the stuff, army of volunteers to put it together. And nobody played on it. And they couldn't believe it. And they were offended, honey, because we did this for the community. And what I later discovered was, but you didn't ask anybody if this is what they wanted. That's what you said they wanted. And so when you ask the people, they said, it's dangerous. I'm not letting my kid outside. And if you go to that park, you saw little empty nickel bags. You saw cigarette butts, hypodermic needles,
shell casings,
prophylactics. If you go where I'm going, right? They were not going to send their kids out there. That's not what they wanted, but you never asked them what they wanted. You did that because it made you feel good. You did that because you had a connection to Lowe's, or you did that because your neighborhood has a park and all the kids love to play. These people will not send their kids outside, period, because it's dangerous there. And so it makes no sense for us to continue to see a decline in turnout, which is mirroring a decline in interest or in optimism or whatever, to still be the ones writing the script. You have to let the people tell you what it is they need or want, and then you go execute on that. And that is how you build trust. And that is how you build community. And that is how you strengthen relationships. Not kicking the door down, going, you know what, Payron, I see your books back there, but you know what you need. I don't know what you need. Right. I haven't spent any time here. My books are over here. Yours are back there. Rom's are blurry. We're all doing it different, right?
Right.
Well, I don't know that whatever brand we have that isn't informed by the very people that make up the party will make any sense. And so right now, today, I'm not subscribing to a brand. Yeah. I want us to go and talk to the very people who didn't show up, who did show up, who believe in us, who have given up for us, on us, and let's figure out a path together, because that becomes coalitional, right? And then we've all built that messaging together. We've all built this brand together. We're going to go out and fight for it together. We're asking people to come fight our own bullies. They're not invested in that. They're not. And they fought your bully with you a couple years ago, and yet nothing ever changed. Why should I do this again?
And it's funny because in this moment, I think we're and again, this is probably my last point here too, but to that point of the brand and listening to the people, I think that's very important, because again, I was going to go back to who are the people that we're trying to reach out to, and it's not everybody. We need to stop saying that we want to get everybody's votes. It's not everybody's votes, and I think the Democratic Party. I mean, again, this podcast is rooted in from the perspective of young Black men and Black people, and Rom's half Black, half Mexican, so a bit of Latino in there as well. But like the idea that where are we going? And before we were talking, I was talking about this idea of the pivot. And the consulting class is very good to say, well, all right, well, this issue is important, but it needs to be that issue, and maybe just scrub your messaging here. And I do forget the name of the psychiatrist, but she was a Black woman psychiatrist, and she was saying that she doesn't like the idea of a pivot, even in your personal life. And she gave this example of, like, if you were on the highway and you wanted to go to the hospital, you wouldn't, you didn't know what was around you, didn't know where you were. You wouldn't just get off on the next exit and keep going straight. Right. You would have to take stock of where you are. You might even need to turn around and do a U-turn. You might even go ask somebody, to your point, go ask the community, am I in the right place? Right. Am I going the right? Is my car making too much noise, or am I hitting pothole? Can you help me out? And I think the party right now is heavy on the pivot and light on the U-turn. Exactly. And we're at a moment where we're almost pivoting into where the Republican Party is going, right? This neoliberal corporatist, mindset. And we need people to kind of be back at the grassroots to the grass tops, focusing on the people.
Yeah. I don't think we have a choice anymore. The federal government is trying to do things nationally is
Yeah.
daunting at this
What,
point.
what do you think about all this segregationist language, Dr. Hardy? I'll leave you with that question. All this anti-DEI stuff, right? Because we know WEI exists, where it's white, entitled, and incompetent. We know WEI exists. So, what do you think about all this DEI stuff?
You know, so this is ridiculous. Like, all it is a new code word for Black. That's all it is. When people say, oh, I'm excited that they're going to get rid of all these DEI hires, you mean Black. But what you didn't realize was it also meant that woman who wouldn't have gotten that job otherwise. It also meant the Latino person. It also meant that, right? We can go on, the person with disabilities, the person from the hood, the person with the, I mean, all it is disgusting that there were people in this election who were fine with somebody losing their health care if it was Obamacare, as long as they didn't touch the Affordable Care Act that you were using, right? I don't know how many people know this, but in the first week after the election, the Google algorithm's most searched term was, is Obamacare the same as the Affordable Care Act? What if I told you Google was open the day before the election too? Honey?
Right.
You also Googled that then, but that you were okay with somebody else getting their health care taken. And let me tell people what this is. As a social worker, it is critically important to explain this to people. When you pay your taxes, and we take that very, very small percentage out to go into those social welfare entitlement programs, people like to call them the social safety net.
Right.
That is you investing in the just in case of your life, just like you do with your car insurance, just like you do with your homeowner's insurance, right? That just in case something happens to me, I want to be able to draw down those dollars to get me and my family through in a time of crisis. It is not a freaking handout. It is not taking something from somebody else and it doesn't belong. That's not what it is. This is money that you pay into so that if something should happen to you, your family member, your neighbor, then they will be okay for a while until they get themselves back on their feet. And so when they say DEI, all they're talking about, what they really mean is just race-coded language for Black. That's all it is. And so and we're not talking about people, but then it's hilarious because then you watch the Super Bowl and I saw this guy's tweet and he was like, all these entertainers are not one Black person. But a minute ago, it was supposed to not be about race. So you're showing your whole hand, which is why you're going to lose. Republicans always do this when they get in power. They overplay their hand and then people are like, this is too much. And then they wind up getting smacked down. So I'm hoping that this is the moment. I'm hoping that this pain that people are feeling, they realize is not partisan. I hope that they recognize that the very person who did this to you told you he was going to do this to you. And all of these Republican legislators who know better. Tom Tillis did not want that guy to be the head of Hedge Pets, the head of the DOD.
Oh,
he didn't want that
Hegseth.
Hegseth. He didn't want
he's a DUI hire.
I know, I've been seeing that, and I'm like, and they had a press conference with him the other day where he was taking, and everybody was like,
I was like, damn,
that's not how you drink water, but okay. And so,
and it was brown,
right, too ice cream. I'm kidding, but like but Tom Tillis got told, but by Trump, oh well, then who should I give my support to in 2026 for this Senate race? Okay, and so now he gets in line. He knows better. But he was thinking about him. They're not thinking about you. They're not. They're trying to make sure that they don't lose that $100,000 and some odd a year job, that they don't lose the health benefits that are so good money can't buy those. They're not at risk of losing anything but a seat. And you can make sure, all of the people watching this, you can make sure that they do. Remember who did this to you. That's right. Remember who did this to you. And so, if you need to bridge the racial divide, go do it. Go join, go to NAACP and listen.
Right, listen.
Go to the AFAM caucus chapter meeting and listen. Go ask your friend at work, and I promise you, if you come to them correctly, they will be glad to help you understand the things that you don't know, right? And so, and so we have to start by having that conversation, acknowledging that things like ballot splitting is real. We need to have it. It's just honest adult conversation. It is not meant to offend or anything. But
Right.
it's, it's just to have a conversation with adults who understand what is at stake and what could happen, what kind of change we could make if we do these things together. So DEI and woke, which by the way is not the insult people think it is. You
Right.
woke.
Oh,
You right.
yes. Yes.
You're Antifa.
Yes, I am
Oh
anti-fascist.
yeah,
Correct. Yes.
I am
Yes.
very anti-fascist, right? Like these are conversations that need to happen because I think there are people, there are some people who are just bigots. When you say, "Oh, we're
No,
not
no
getting that vote,"
question.
no, we're not. I'm not going after the bigoted vote. We're not going to change
Mhm.
hearts and minds today. But there are people right now who are recognizing that they probably were misled, or they probably put their trust and faith in somebody based on things that weren't going to mean anything to them. Those egg prices are not coming down, right? Those tariffs are not paid by China. Obamacare and Affordable Care Act is the same thing. Like it, and I just hope that these people don't let their pain be in vain. I hope that they remember who did this to them. And I hope we reach out to them as a party in an authentic way to say, we have a better path forward for you than that. And so, but for our folks, listen, this is what I'm gonna say about our folks. We need to show up. This is
Mhm.
not the time to lead.
Right.
This is the time to lead. Um, I know it's so frustrating. I know it's so frustrating. I took the 92% break after the election. I just needed a minute. I was so upset. And I promised myself that after MLK Day, I would
Mm.
dig all the way back in. MLK Day, only two things of any significance happened. One, we celebrated the contributions of Dr. King. And two, my alma mater, The Ohio State University, became national champions again, as they should be.
There you go.
And
That's it. That's all that
nothing else
happened. That's it. That was
happened.
it.
That's all that happened that day.
I
But
can't tell you anything else.
it's time now because we've already sat on this call and said nobody's going into our communities but us. Right. And so we need to go into our communities and let our folks know that their voices really can make a difference. They don't believe it, but we know that it's true. And so we can't let them live in that space when we know that their voices do matter. So if the grassroots folks will do their work there and I will join them in that, then I will make sure that this party and these candidates show up for them.
Yes, you
Just
will.
like it did the last time. I'll just keep beating that drum. We finally got lit right during early vote, translated into Spanish. Yo hablo español. And muy importante que we have a message that goes to the Latino community as well. I made sure that the AAPI caucus got $10,000 to help them with GOTV on election day.
Mm.
You
Mm.
tell me what you need, and I'll make sure that I get that done. But we have to make sure that our people know that their voices do matter and they can exercise the power they have to get the change they want. It's not going to happen any other way. So
Well, Dr. Hardy, thank you for joining us tonight. That
thanks
was
for
a
having me.
riveting conversation.
Yes,
We're only over about 1 minute, so it's not too bad. No, I'm joking, but it was great. It's always good talking to you. You're always full of so
likewise.
much wisdom and love of your community, no matter who they are. But you definitely have a soft spot in your heart for all of us that have
That's
melanin
right.
in this country because we
That's
know what
right.
we've been through. Thank you again for joining us, and good luck in your re-election race. I mean,
Thank
again,
you.
how can I support you as a chair? I'm going to be up there, but like again, I want to be able to put something in. Again, we're at the end of this episode, but like, how can I
But I listen,
endorse you?
if you want to put something out that says I wholeheartedly endorse
Okay,
our
all right.
party, you can do that. Whip votes. I am very fortunate, as is Elijah King, our third vice, who is also Black.
That's
Who,
right.
by the way, is another set of issues we need to discuss in our
Yep,
community, which is the Black
absolutely.
LGBTQ stuff.
Correct.
So I would love for y'all to have him on to talk about that.
He was watching
Put in a good
tonight. He was
word.
on tonight watching
Yeah,
too.
Oh, well, all right. Well, see, I can't see the comments, so I don't know what's going on.
Oh yeah, I don't even know how
We're on
Elijah.
Instagram and
Yeah,
YouTube. He was on Instagram. Yeah,
Okay,
so
we
all
need
right.
to talk
Well,
about the ways in
let's
which.
tee it up.
Yeah,
yes,
let's get him on because there's a lot there. But he and I are running unopposed.
Oh, nice.
And so we're really happy. But both of us have been, making calls, making
The
posts
black
because
folks is unopposed. Look at that.
listen,
Look
and
at
that's a
God.
beautiful thing, man. That's a beautiful thing. And so, but as long as nobody jumps up from the audience, then
Right.
we should be okay. But if you want to whip votes for folks, get your fellow county chairs and stuff,
All
and
right.
tell them to put us back in place. We would love to keep doing this work. We don't take any of y'all for granted.
Thank
I
you
love
very
it.
much
I
for
love it.
stopping in. I enjoyed hearing your perspective. I enjoyed listening
Thank
to your
you.
two conversations as county and state vets and everything. So appreciate what you do. And
Absolutely.
I appreciate you guys for making this space for folks. I really do. Thanks for having me on.
All right. Well, you have a great evening, and we'll talk to you soon.
Okay. Bye, guys.
take care.
Bye.
Bye.